Welcome to Mint's pre-budget discussion on Making in India. We have a very interesting panel, people with very diverse viewpoints here to discuss what the budget could hold and what it should. From the left, we have Monica Hallan, who looks after the personal finance and investing section for Mint. We have Mukesh Bhutani, who heads BMR, a tax advisory. Rahul Bhasin heads Bearings in India. It's a private equity fund. Kishore Jayaraman from Rolls-Royce, a manufacturing company. Krishna from Philips. Rajesh from Max New York Life. We have Ravi Uppal from the Jindal Group. Balwinder Kalsi from DuPont. Vipin Sondhi from JCB. And we have Anil Padmanabhan, who is the Deputy Managing Editor of Mint, looks after policy, politics. So in many ways, the budget is his domain. I'd like each one of you to think and answer a couple of questions. The first one, ever since the new government came to power, there have been two schools of thought, right? One says everything is all right, things are moving in the right direction, but in private they'll tell you there's nothing that's happening on the ground, you know. And the second thing, we all know that there are huge expectations of this budget, right? Because last budget was in many ways a budget for 7-8 months, and we all knew that Mr. Jaitley was saving his firepower for this budget. So this was really supposed to be the big bang budget. So do you think it will be a big bang budget? So we are going to start off with Monica.
I think it will be fair to give the government 12 months of completion of their first year really in managing a situation which was so bad that a lot of us thought that we're really on the brink. Coming to the budget, I work in the area of retail finance and households. I think households want more money in their pockets. They do have, the savings have fallen due to the huge impact of inflation. So they are looking at the finance minister to give some sort of relief on the tax space. And I think there is that desire to have more deductions in place. So purely from the point of view of the household, they're looking for more benefits.
Thank you, Monica. So essentially, Monica says, give them time. We're getting all the right signals. And expectedly, everyone wants more money. Right. Okay.
I think the budget is expected to set a tone. It's expected to lend direction to reforms. I think also most people from a perception viewpoint view budget as a once in an annual year statement. I think yes, it's a statement on the state of affairs of the economy on an annual basis. But more importantly, if you look at the economic reforms agenda, it is like saying that this is what we intend to do for the next 3 to 4 years. It would be big bang from the point of view of setting the directional agenda, but I don't anticipate that there is something magical that will happen in the 1 year statement that the government typically presents on an annual basis.
Thanks, Vipin. Balwinder?
I think rather than, looking at, are the taxes going to be reduced or something, I think what people are looking for is the long-term direction that the budget is going to lay. What's the vision for sustained future growth over the next 5 to 7 years to come? And with regard to ease of doing business, it's great that we started talking about it. So once you start talking about it, I'm sure there will be progress. So I think those are the areas we'll be looking forward.
Rahul, we've largely had positive views so far. So I'm hoping you'll oblige me and say something critical.
I will criticize the discussions and the paraphernalia with one context. And that is that in 1820, we were 25% of world GDP. We are today 2.5% of world GDP. Which means that we've grossly mismanaged the economy so far, right? In a situation like this, sometimes hard decisions need to be made which may be unpopular. We all talk about structural reform and we're all talking about aspirationally 6.5, 7, we may get to 8% growth. But let's put this in context and look around you, look at the world around you the last 40, 50 years. You'll find innumerable examples of countries which grew between 13 and 15% a year for 2 decades or more. What is it that we need to do to get that done? And I wish that there was more of that kind of discussion. I know it is unrealistic to expect that we will suddenly get there.
How easy has it become over the last 7-8 months to do business in India? Do you see some changes there? Kishore, we'll go first with you.
Well, it's still a work in progress, Sukumar, because I think to expect something to happen overnight in about 6-7 months is probably too big a challenge. But if you look at the vision itself as to the direction to be taken, the tax reforms, the labor reforms, the need to make in India and the associated sort of what should I say, roadblocks being removed in order to make it happen, I think the vision is very clear. So it's still a wait and watch mode at this point in time, but I do see that a lot of people are very interested in making sure that this is moving into the execution phase as we speak.
On the tax reform side, honestly, I don't expect a significant reduction in taxes with this budget. But what will help will be if there's clear direction on retrospective taxation. There's a reduction in tax terrorism. There are targets set for the tax departments usually in the final quarter if we get rid of that. So if we see progress along those dimensions, we will see improvement in tax reforms. Overall, I'm very hopeful.
Vipin, what's your perspective?
I would like to strike a slightly contrarian note on that one. I think the direction has all been positive, but has action on the ground as far as infrastructure started taking place? The answer is no. And that should happen very, very quickly, because initially we do have a huge infrastructure deficit. So what I'd be looking at from the budget is how does the fiscal space within the context of fiscal consolidation take place for public spending to take place for kicking up infrastructure growth till such time as private investment comes in.
Thank you. That's a good point. We'll discuss more about it after we come back after this break. Welcome back to Mint's pre-budget discussion on remaking India. Rajesh, insurance, one of the areas where there's actually been some movement.
To me, while we've kind of said it's essentially been sentiment which has been positive, and real stuff is kind of taking time and will take time in the situation that we are, I would say simplification is the one thing that all of us are talking about. So simplification would be a big theme that I would look for from the budget as to how does it simplify ease of doing business, the way we can actually report things out, the tax terrorism, all of that stuff.
Everyone seems to think that this budget will set the direction clearly. Vipin said we'd like to see how they action the whole thing, and then that's a theme that came through even from this side. So do you think this government has the will to do that?
I think it's time for the private sector to hit the ball and start running instead of constantly coming out with a wish list in any budget. Because I think that is what this budget, they should drop from this budget. We probably should be seeing a lot of, out-of-the-box decisions like, say, his idea of privatizing railway stations, monetizing the land around railway stations. So these out-of-the-box solutions will come. So I think the means are limited, but you really need Indian industry to walk the talk now.
I think industry will do that provided there is more clarity about tax, there's more clarity about doing business in India. So I guess we just have to wait and see. But Ravi, you wanted to say something to...
I think the private sector as of today, when it comes to heavy investment, they're in the watch mode. Although they have a feel-good factor, but they're not still willing to commit their money because a lot of them are stuck, with the old issues. They're not fully out of the woods. I would like to suggest that we should do on 2 different time frames. For the next 2 to 3 years, the private sector is still starved of funds and they are highly leveraged. But as of this moment, the government as a public sector is flush with money. So this is why I'm inclined to suggest that the government should put more money for the next 2 to 3 years. In the meantime, private sector will regain their confidence. They will also be able to marshal more financial resources and they will catch on that. So I think we should try to look at that.
I also want you to tell us, because I think you're sitting in a place where in some ways you have a very, very good proxy measure of whether all these stalled projects across the country have restarted or not. Right? I think you can just look at your sales and apply a multiple or a factor and just come up with that. So if you can
Answer that. For the first couple of years, fiscal space will have to be created to kickstart investment before private investment comes in. And kickstarting that investment could be through strategic sale of PSUs, through monetizing land which is available either with the government or the railways or the ports, or disinvestment. So the answer is that can the government identify either 25 or 50 projects of national importance, be it DMIC, be it DFC, be it something from ports, etc., and actually work on kick-starting and moving these.
Mukesh.
The first thing the government has to fix is banks. Banks are in problem because of the private sector. Because banks are saying, if private sector is overlent, we are into trouble. And who's going to bail out the banks? The government. So I think at the end of the day, this is a zero-sum game. We should not expect the government to write the check, because if the government starts writing checks to banks for capitalization, you're going to have even a bigger fiscal mess that you land yourself into. But I personally feel that you will not be able to take off any infrastructure projects till the time you achieve financial closure.
That's true. Rahul, you wanted to say?
Actually, to the point of infrastructure, if you think about it, first impetus on infrastructure will have to come from the government itself spending. And the government's got to look at their model of engaging with the private sector and say, if I have the authority to do A, B, C, D, E, then the government must take the responsibility to deliver A, B, C, D, E within a certain time frame. And if they delay, they must be willing to compensate the private sector for it. And if that were to happen, you will see this taking off.
That was an excellent conclusion. We'll take a short break now and come back. Welcome back to Mint's pre-budget discussion on remaking India. So I'm going to do one last round and ask each one of you to list one or two things which you'd really like to see in the budget. We'll start with Monica. We'll go from left to right. So Monica.
I will simply take the householders point of view and say that if you ease up the way that people think about their tax saving and their household finances, if there was more clarity and if there was more equitable distribution of the tax benefit across financial products, and also maybe a higher threshold of overall tax deduction, that would just put more money in the household's pocket.
Mukesh?
I consider budget as exercise driven by two objectives. One is the legislative agenda of the government, which it needs to get passed through by the 15th of May. Second is non-legislative part of the business. As far as the non-legislative part of the business is concerned, it's an ongoing exercise. You need a set of bills, regulations, good governance to be able to improve everything. As far as legislative part of the business is concerned, two aspects. One on fiscal deficit, second on direction of tax policy.
Thanks, Mukesh. Rahul?
I think it should be made compulsory for every finance minister from today onwards that he says, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, therefore I'm allocating so much money, and these are the three different alternative means of accomplishing this, and this is why we believe that this is the best way.
Are there any governments in the world which use the accrual system?
The government should show that as a contingent liability. I don't think the government should show that as a revenue. So, in a way, even if you follow cash basis, you should show that.
As long as the classification is
absolutely.
Right. Kishore?
Make in India has been a great vision. Question is, what is going to happen with this budget to support it, so that it can be actually implemented and there will be growth seen from the Make in India campaign.
Krishna?
Rather than call it Make in India, I would say doing business in India much easier. And through a combination of both tax reforms and also approvals being hastened substantially. And creation of that single window for clearances.
Rajesh?
From my point of view, I think clearly tax reform is a big thing. That's really what budget focuses on. I think it'd be very helpful to see some rules emerge on GST implementation. That's the big reform that's pending. It's been talked about. We are making progress, but this would be a good time to really, get the rules kind of notified, get 6-9 months to debate it, and then give confidence of implementation so that we can all work towards it. So you can actually address two real burning issues of the country, one at an individual household level, the other at a country level.
Ravi, keeping with the spirit of encouraging Make in India, make sure you remain extremely sensitive to give the safeguard duty to industry which are investing big time, because we are a minnow in front of the huge Chinese might. And Chinese, if you open the borders without checks, they will completely kill your industry. I think, we have to be very watchful on that.
So if I would say a couple of things I would wish for is a fair and predictable regime on taxation. If you have disputes, a panel which can efficiently address those disputes that are happening, and concrete steps towards improving ease of doing business.
Promoting investment, infrastructure, shovel-ready projects get the momentum going. That's one part. The other part, I think, is of containing inflation, because then that will open up the RBI's hands to reduce interest rates.
Thank you. Anil?
I think the roadmap for fiscal consolidation, I think very transparently should put it, like you rightly said, whether it's going to go downhill initially or stabilize. But there has to be a transparent FRBM put in place, which has been dismantled. Then finally on the roadmap would be the ease of doing business. We do know that the government has been working on this to bring it down to some sizable number from a humongous 100-odd conditions that have to be fulfilled. So presumably this budget would give that roadmap. So I think I would sum this up at that level.
Thank you, Anil. I think that was an excellent conclusion. That brings us to the end of this discussion on what the budget could hold and what it should. Thank you very much.